recording.
We are on episode 28.
We are. So, Dylan.
Yeah.
You want to do this podcast thing again?
Yeah. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Yeah, that's right. We are back. This is Sega Does Podcast, episode 28. I never thought I'd see today. I didn't think Dylan did either. But we are here, and we are here to talk about the Sega Mega Drive. Joining me, Sam the Pixel Dude, virtually to my left. It is a pleasure to say once again, welcoming the Dylan D. How are we doing, Dylan?
Whoa. How did this happen? I don't even know.
Nope.
I attribute it to the fact that the Mega Drive's call, the siren song, which is too strong, we had to come back and take care of business like gentlemen do. Yeah, this is awesome, man.
Yep.
It's good to hear your voice again.
It is. It should be in a bit better quality, hopefully, with some music playing in the background. So if there's some technical difficulties today, I do apologise, but, you know, it's been a while. So today, we are back. We are back. Sega Does fans of the blog, the website, the podcast, all the above will hopefully be rejoicing and thanking the Lord in the streets that we are back. That's how I see it in my head, anyway. Yes, we will be addressing some of the games we've missed, but to kick off back in the swing of things, we've got a really, really good place to start again. We are starting with the Mega Drive, and just before we what should we say? Took a hiatus. Is that how we say it? Yeah.
Hiatus, yeah.
We very, very nearly just about touched the Mega Drive. I don't think we actually talked about Mega Drive at all, did we?
I mean, probably in our rambles, yes, we did. We touched on it, but not in an official,
games, no.
Yeah, not in an official sense.
So, we're going to talk about the Mega Drive today, and we're going to kick off from there. As we did with our SG-1000 and with a Master System, we had a hardware-centric episode, and the Mega Drive, kind of unlike, I mean, I suppose there was some peripherals with Master System and stuff like that, but the Mega Drive, whew, there's some hardware to get through. So, anyway, this is Sega Does. And today is our Mega Drive episode. So, let's kick her off with some Toe Jam and Earl, I think. Let's give it. That is the unmistakable sound of a Mega Drive, don't you agree?
Yeah, and you know, as I get older, I really like the kind of cold-hearted synth sound that the Mega Drive has. I never really appreciated it as that much when I was a kid, with the exception of, like, you know, the Sonic and Streets of Rage and all that. But yeah, even games that I don't really, you know, that aren't the best. There's something about the Genesis sound chip that is yeah.
I will admit, before starting Sega Does, I really had a chip on my shoulder about the Sega Mega Drive, Sega Genesis North America sound chip. It just, I really hated it with a passion, like really hated it. But you know what? It really has grown on me, so quite a bit. And let's talk about the Mega Drive now. Sega Mega Drive, also known as Sega Genesis in North America, released in the land of Japan in 1988. That's incredible.
That's nuts. And it almost feels like they jumped the gun too much, but I understand why they felt like they had to at the same time.
Yeah.
Because, you know, their arcade side was doing so well, they were just releasing hit game after hit game, and then they put out a conversion for the Master System, and people were like, well, it's okay, but it doesn't even compare. And I know back in those days, people didn't have the expectations that we do now, but I still, Sega. I mean, Sega's not one to just sit around and do nothing. They do too much. That's their problem. Mm-hmm. And so you can look at the Genesis box. Arcade graphics and sound is like featured on there.
That was the main push at the time. I mean, the big graphics, the stuff that looked better than home was coming out of the arcades. That was the only place you were getting it.
Right.
PCs weren't regarded as gaming machines at all, really. What you had back then really was like gaming computers, as in like the Commodore and the Spectrum and stuff like that. Gaming on PCs as a mainstream thing, I wouldn't really say existed at all. It was the arcades was where it was at, and then obviously the NES came along with the Master System and pushed that home market up a notch. It overtook the arcades, it overtook everything really, and that became where you play games. And as the NES started to fade and arcades started to overtake it, you've got to remember when the NES came out, it was kind of on par with arcade stuff. I mean, the original stuff was obviously poorly programmed and stuff like that, but the NES, when it came out, was very, very impressive for a home console. But then, as the arcades grew up and got more powerful, people at home wanted more, and Sega were the first to jump on really the main 16-bit bandwagon.
Yeah, they were. They were the first in Japan, for sure. And I don't have any sort of hard data if they were the first in North America or if the TurboGrafx got here. And I know there's an argument about, well, the TurboGrafx is really an 8-bit system, but not really an argument. It's just kind of reality, I guess. But the Genesis definitely. I mean, even this initial crop of games, the launch titles, Space Harrier 2 doesn't look quite as good still as the original Space Harrier, and neither does Altered Beast, but they're so much closer than the Master System that it feels good enough. Like, it feels like, oh, this is fine.
And I remember at the time, like, the adverts, the commercials, as you were saying, in the States, on TV, they were literally like arcade one side, Genesis left, or Mega Drive left. Look at these. Look. There wasn't saying it's arcade perfect. They were saying it's like having the arcade at home, which it was like having the arcade at home. It wasn't exactly the same, and you could see in the screenshots it wasn't exactly the same. There were some colour changes. Some of the sprites weren't quite the right detail, but it was, and it wasn't lying, which I think is weird for a Sega commercial. Because the original commercials didn't lie, and then they just went balls to the walls and started making up all kinds of terms and iconography and stuff like that for their latest stuff. But the original Sega Genesis commercials were very good and very accurate, which is what really I think helped push it into the home over like Nintendo systems, especially in the United States. But I mean, we have a launch date here, UK. We have the 14th of the 9th, 1990, which is a long while before the Super NES ever got here. Yeah. And also the US date was the August 89. Now they're a lot closer than I imagined. Actually, they're only a year apart. Usually back then, hardware releases from the US to UK were a lot further apart.
I think it's because Sega already had a foothold with the Master System, and they probably were like, okay, well, we got to get it out sooner than later there because, and the Mega Drive was huge in the UK.
It always made me laugh. Like the Master System was called obviously the Master System in the UK and the US, but it was called Mark III in Japan. But then with the Mega Drive, they kept the same name in Japan and the UK, and then changed it in the US. It's weird.
Yeah, there was a copyright. There was a copyright deal. There somebody already had in America the name Mega Drive. It was a. Yeah, okay. Let Let me reference my own article here. Due to a trademark dispute with the computer storage company, the Mega Drive was renamed the Genesis.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there we go.
So, the more you know.
The more I know. Anyway, so let's have a look at some tech specs here. We have a Motorola 68000 running at 7.67 megahertz. Ooh. It had 64 kilobits of RAM and 64 kilobits of VRAM. Now that was quite important. The fact that it had the same amount of RAM as VRAM. And then we have a video processor, which was Yamaha YM7101, capable of 512 direct colours, 64 standard colours, and 4 graphic layers. Ooh. Now the sound processor, that lovely sound processor, which I won't say loved, grew to love. The Zilog Z80 with a Yamaha YM2612 FM sound chip capable of 6 channels and a Sega PSG sound chip. So this thing was stacked. It really was stacked. And I might be getting this slightly wrong, but the board that the Genesis ran on was virtually the same as Sega's. I can't remember which model it was. I want to say Model 1 arcade board, but I don't think that's the right number. Anyway, it is the same as what arcade board they had been running in the arcades, but it ran at 2.43 megahertz slower. So the arcade board ran at roughly about 10, about 10.1, something like that. And then the Genesis at home ran at 7.6. So that's how the arcade conversions were so perfect. It's because it literally was the same hardware, and Sega. It's so weird. They did it with the Genesis and they did it with the Dreamcast, but they didn't do it with the Saturn. They just took their arcade board and put it in the home board. Why they didn't do it with the Saturn, I do not know. It's so bizarre.
Many poor choices with the Saturn. Yeah, the mid '90s did not treat Sega very well. No. They lost their common sense. If they ever had any, but I mean, certainly in the mid '90s, it was gone. So, yeah, the poor Saturn just never had a chance.
Now, there were actually 3 versions of the Genesis, but there were 2 main versions. There was the Mark 1, obviously, and the Mark 2, obviously. Now, the Mark 1, something I found really interesting, it had a separate volume for its headphone jack.
Yes.
Which is kind of obvious when you think about it, but it took a right prominent place on the system.
Yeah, on the left-hand side, the bottom left-hand side.
Now, did you ever use it?
No, but you know what's funny is a buddy of mine. I don't think he modded his system. I think he runs. He ran speakers out of there.
Yeah, you can hook them up to hi-fis and whatever. Yeah,
and he said the sound is great.
Yeah.
He said he's like, the sound is amazing coming from that thing, and it's a 25-year-old console and with great sound. I mean, that's.
Well, I run mine through obviously an RGB cable because I'm lucky and I live in a country with decent signal output, and my sound comes straight out of the jack as well. And I must admit, going through a nice modern Sony hi-fi, it just sounds so crisp, It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So I never used it as a kid. I got my, maybe I might be jumping the gun a little bit here, but I got a Genesis in '91. I of course was about 6 and I had jumped on the Sonic craze, and I never played it, but I'm sure I'd seen commercials or something, and I got the Sonic pack in. So I was one of those kids that contributed to the Genesis overtaking Nintendo, or Sega overtaking Nintendo for about 3 years.
Yeah, which it did do. And that was my next point. We'll just talk about the Mark II just quickly. The Mark II, it was a smaller piece of machinery. The plastic was of a lesser quality in my mind, but I actually do honestly think the Mark II looked a better system. It looked more thought out, more 90s.
Yeah, it's hard because my cousin had the Mark II, and we were over at each other's house, back and forth, and I had the Mark I, and I still think I prefer the Mark I, even though it's a bit bulkier. Yeah. There's something about it that I like, and
that's nostalgia talking.
Well, you say that, but I personally think the NES has hands down one of the worst designs of any console I've ever seen. It's just horrible. It's a box.
You've never said that to me before, and I 100% agree.
I'm saying it right now.
Yeah.
I wish they had done something like the Famicom, but not with the controllers tethered to the console.
It's weird at my Blockbuster's a thing in there. Well, was a thing in the States.
Was a thing, yeah.
My local Blockbuster, obviously, everyone used to rent videos back in the day, and their slot for where you posted the videos back when the store was closed.
Yeah,
it's like the opening was just like an NES, and like the first time I got my hands on the NES and like looked at it, I thought, oh, that looks like the slot of Blockbuster. I always thought that's such a stupid way of putting games in there. Maybe it's because I had top-loaded machines before that, but I just always thought that's odd. Anyway.
Well, isn't that the only, as far as I know, the NES is the only machine with the side loader. I don't think any other console ever did that.
No, I don't think it did.
No.
There's a good reason why.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, the controller.
Yeah, the controller.
Now, to say it wasn't like moving forward is a bad thing, because it had 3 buttons, not 2. So you are moving forward, but somewhere in there, I personally didn't think the Sega Master System D-pad was that bad. I know a lot of people do, but I didn't think it was as bad as people made out. The D-pad, the buttons, the form factor of the controller, it's all terrible.
Yeah, you know what it really reminds me of is, and not to this extent, because I still maintain that this is the worst, the original Xbox controller, the big anchor.
Oh, the Duke.
The Duke. Duke of New York, #1. That is kind of what this reminds me of, in that the follow-up, which they quickly released, well, not Sega, but Microsoft quickly released a smaller controller that became the standard.
Yeah, the Type S, that was, yeah.
But I actually think the Mark II, the 6-button controller, which became standard, if I'm not mistaken, that one is far, like, I only would play with that.
That is really good. They released the second. It must have been a Japan first thing. It must have. They released a second controller for it, which actually was a 6-button controller, which obviously must have somehow been enforced by Street Fighter being so big. But if I'm not mistaken, it was pretty late to the party. It was like 93, 94. It wasn't a 92 thing. I'm sure it wasn't.
Maybe that's true. Because to be honest, I kind of dropped off the Sega map once the Super Nintendo came out, and I was all about that. So you might be right.
Yeah, I might even say it was a 94 thing. Like, honestly, all the research and all the many Mega Drives I've had, which is quite a few over the years, actually, surprisingly, I've never actually had one come with a 6-button controller ever.
Well, with the fighting game craze, I mean, you'd have to. You can't get away with 3 buttons.
Fighting games on consoles wasn't really. We'll get into that another time. Over here is a little different story. Anyway, we'll get into that. Anyway, so what do we have here? Yes, what I was going to talk about market share. Is what I wanted to say now. Coming into 1990, I think it says that 1990, even if it's 91. When the Genesis came out, Sega had a 5%/negative, which is 5% or less, market share in the video games console home business in the United States. Okay, so that weird kid in the corner at school, even I had one, he had a Master System, okay? Anyway, over here, actually, he had his brother's old Spectrum, which everyone made fun of him about. But anyway, so they had less than 5%. Jump forward to the 1993/1994 holiday season. Okay, when that holiday period ended, Sega had a 55% market share. That is incredible.
Yeah, and especially with Nintendo being so dominant. I mean, you go from 95% dominance to losing,
You lost half your business.
Right. You lost half your business because you didn't account for the fact that your user base was going to grow very quickly.
Yeah.
It, like, grow up, and age very quickly into teenagers, and they might not necessarily want to play Chippendale Rescue Rangers 2. I did, but a lot of teenagers are like, no, man, give me Mortal Kombat, give me NBA Jam, and all that other stuff that people more associate with the Genesis.
Yeah,
so.
And obviously, what you were talking about earlier is a big factor of that was that little blue hedgehog, which was Sonic the Hedgehog.
Mm-hmm.
And it was created out of a internal Sega competition, and there was a few other entries that are quite famous. I think there was a what's it called, the Australian thing? Armadillo. There was a yellow armadillo.
Mighty?
Yeah, actually.
Well, he wasn't originally Mighty, but they did come up with a Mighty the Armadillo.
He actually got to the final 5. Oh God, crazy. And there was a possum. Was there a possum? Or am I getting that with Awesome? Mixed up with Awesome Possum, the Eco Warrior. I can't remember. That is a strange game.
The Eco Warrior.
I can't remember what it says. Be awesome or something like that. It says something crazy like that. Anyway, yeah. So Sonic came along, and that really did kickstart the Genesis Mega Drive craze. It was, I would say, even more than Super Mario Brothers. Okay, because people didn't really know what they wanted when Super Mario Brothers came out. It was just the best of what there was, so people went to it. It just so happened to become an icon. Okay, Sega designed Sonic to be an icon, and Sega designed exactly what people wanted, exactly when they wanted it. And I think this is the only time in history they ever did it, but that's crazy.
That is crazy, and a story that, if I'm wrong, people can correct me in the comments or whatever, but if I'm not mistaken, the CEO of Sega of America at the time was trying to convince Sega of Japan to release this as a bundle pack in America, and with Sonic with the Genesis, and they're like, oh, we can't do that, it's like our best title. And he's like, you don't understand, like, if you do this is going to be huge for business, and he convinced them somehow. And I'm not sure the exact argument, because Sega of Japan was considerably not on board with most of Sega of America's goings on, but he convinced them, and sure enough, of course, it changed their fortunes considerably.
That must have been the 91 Christmas holiday. It had to have been.
That was, yeah. That's when it was for me. That's when I got it. That's
when you got it, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So, yeah. I mean, it went on to sell 40 million plus units. It's funny. It was how you naturally progress through the console cycle, I suppose, as you can call it. Nowadays we just take it for granted, but obviously back then this was a brand new thing. We didn't realise, like, this was a machine that played games. We didn't know that there could be better games. We didn't know there could be a new system that could replace things. This was the first, and I don't think the West quite got that, as in the US, like, straight away. But over here, as far as I can remember it from my childhood, it was a much more natural progression here, because we were so invested in the Master System. It was so ingrained. The Mega Drive was just like a natural. Oh yeah, well, we'll get a Mega Drive then. It didn't feel like that. Oh my God, games can get better. Games can be this. Games can be that. It wasn't like that here.
Well, and I mean, would you say that because Nintendo didn't have as strong of a foothold, would you say that there really wasn't competition?
Yeah,
like there might have been over here.
Yeah,
because here, I mean, if you were a kid and you didn't have a job, you had to choose.
Yeah,
and that choice sucked most of the time.
And I suppose then there was no hand-me-down, was there?
Well, for me as an only child, no. But
well, I mean, there wasn't the console generations to have been the hand-me-down, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh yes, no, that's true. I mean, I started with the NES in '89, and I was a spoiled kid, man. Like I got 3 consoles in 3 years, and looking back,
wow.
I'm like, how did I do that? I went from the NES in '89 to the Genesis in '91, and then Super Nintendo in '92.
Wow.
And then the good times were over after that. It was just games, and then until the 64 in '96, which I very much regret doing now. But
really?
Not for Mario 64, and not for Star Fox, and not for GoldenEye.
I was so jealous of the kids with an N64. I really was, because we chosen a PlayStation, and I didn't regret having a PlayStation because we had Tomb Raider and Tekken and all the stuff you had. But there was a girlfriend I had. Well, it wasn't really girlfriends. When you're 11, 12, you don't really have proper girlfriends. But I used to go around her house, and she had a 64, and she had. I remember she had like 3 games. She had Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, and a Formula 1 game. And I just thought it was like going around somebody's house with a supercomputer. They're like, the games to me, they look so much better. And it was, I kind of was like, oh, why didn't I get a 64? And eventually, obviously, I got a 64 before the PS2 came out. But I don't know, man. I mean, it's probably like, if I'd actually had those games and played them, I'd have realised, oh, I played the 3 or 4 games that are actually good on this system, and then been bored with them, which is probably what would have happened.
Well, and if I'm honest, the 32 64-bit era, like the PlayStation N64 Saturn era, I have no experience with the Saturn for the most part, with the exception of a couple games, but that's my least favorite era of gaming ever. I mean, they're just, the PlayStation 1 got great towards the end of its lifespan. Like 98 through 2000, there's some just killer titles.
Yep. Maybe
even 97, actually. I'll be a little generous. But those early days, man, there were some bad games on there. And the 64 was kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
The first couple of years were great. And then it just petered out, with the exception of like maybe Conkers and Paper Mario. But
yeah,
that's how a lot of Nintendo systems are.
You know what? We managed to do it, dude. We managed to talk Nintendo on our first podcast back.
Oh yeah,
brilliant.
Can't help it. Can't help. Can't feed the monkey.
That's very true.
Anyway, so yeah, to get back to what we were talking about before, the Genesis is a great system, and Sonic made it. The Genesis was already a good system prior to Sonic.
Yeah. But
Sonic brought it to people's attention. And
he was it was perfect case of right time, right place. It just worked.
It just worked. He was the perfect mascot for the generation, the 90s generation of kids coming up.
Now, we're talking about Sonic. I would like to play you a piece of music which I found quite interesting. Now, this is a Sonic melody done by the Super Guitar Brothers. Now, you will like this, Dylan, I promise you.
Okay.
It's quite long, but I'm not going to play all of it. But I want you to have a listen to this. Now, this is a melody of, like, the intro and Green Hill Zone and boss music and all stuff like that, but it's all done on 2 guitars, which I think is amazing. So, here we go with Super Guitar Brothers with the Sonic melody.
That's really good. When you said guitars, my mind went to electric guitars, and I thought, I'm glad it was acoustic. Actually,
yeah. There's one guy plays just like normal guitar, and one guy plays like Spanish nylon string guitar. They're really good guys. You should check those guys out. Super Guitar Brothers, one of my favorites.
Awesome. Yeah, I will check them out, because a lot of times I don't know. I like that sort of music, but it's not something you can really buy. Like, you kind of have to listen to it on YouTube.
It's hard
so,
yeah, which brings me on to my next point of contention, which is the sound. Now, many people argue what's better, what's worse. You know, you can say technically the Super Nintendo's got a better sound because it does more sample rates and all stuff like this. And it's got better MIDI channels, blah blah blah. But even more than the actual graphics themselves, the sound of the systems, to me, is what makes them stand apart.
Yeah, very much so. The Super Nintendo, with both graphics and sound, just has a smoother, softer feel to it. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Genesis is this harsh, even in games that aren't so, I don't know, adult. I don't know if that's not really the right term, but like kind of discordant, like just kind of blatty bass, and it's just, you think it's like, this shouldn't work, but for some reason
it does.
Yeah.
Your ears take like 30 seconds to get used to the harshness, and then once it's sorted that out, I mean, it's fine. I mean, for instance, here we've got a bit of Yoshi's Island. See, there you can hear it's like nice and soft and stuff like that, and then you get stuff like Castlevania Bloodlines. It's just like it's a lot harsher.
Yeah,
but it's got a character, hasn't it? It's different.
Yeah, it is, and I think I don't think either one is bad. No. I think they're both great for their own right.
Now, as you've probably gathered by now, the Sega Genesis Mega Drive was a pretty awesome console, but Sega wasn't prepared to stop there. Oh no. We can do better than that, they said. So, with the advent of CD technology, they released the Sega CD, as it's known in North America, or the Sega Mega CD as it's known everywhere else, which was a CD-based add-on. And they didn't just release one of these things, they released two, obviously, because they had the Mark I and the Mark II Mega Drive. So there are two different shapes of this thing, and this is kind of where the Sega CD is the point where Sega started to, for no reason at all, clutch at straws.
Yeah, they didn't have to. They didn't have to release a CD peripheral like that. I know they always felt like they had to be one step ahead. That kind of, I think that goes back to being scarred by the SG-1000.
Yeah,
they were so far behind with that system.
Of course.
They were so far behind, and they were. I'm sure they resolved never to do that again. But the issue is that they should have looked and gone, all right, our market share is great. It's getting better every day. The Genesis, we're still tapping into the power of that thing. I'm presuming they were starting work on a new system even in 92 or 91. They were, at least gathering data for the Saturn, or whatever, 32X. I mean, who knows what all they were doing.
I've always wondered if the fact that Sega was an arcade company as well, and it was a very, very successful and very, very innovative arcade company at the time in the 90s. I always wonder if they were like the arcade division and the home console division were too close.
Yeah, because when you said that, what my mind first thought of was, because they released new boards like fairly regularly.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't like every 5 years. It was like every year or two.
It was
something like
at
that?
One point. It was if it wasn't 18 months, it was a year. Yeah.
Okay. So if you're thinking like that, and if you're thinking on that mindset, then you're like, holy cow, the Genesis is 3 years old. We got to do something.
Yeah.
We got to prop it up. And
it's also like the arcade. Obviously, the arcade, like back in like the mid '80s, the arcade's what the NES would be, and then obviously in the '90s, the arcade is what the NES would be, and then in the mid, like when you get into like the 3D stuff, Sega knew what was going. Like they knew what consoles were going to be. Okay, they knew what was coming next, so they tried, like, because of the arcade division, they knew this was possible. So they tried to cram it in, and they didn't need to. I mean, you look at like Sonic 1 compared to Sonic 3. There was so much juice left in the Genesis. You didn't need chips. You know, I mean, like you can say, "Oh, Mario World 2." There's a massive difference. Yes, there is, but people forget Mario World 2 had a huge FX2 chip in there, helping it.
Yeah.
You know? Stuff like that. I mean, there was some progression in Super Nintendo games, but a lot of the later Super Nintendo games had these extra chips, had these extra boards in the cartridges. If you look at early Sega Genesis cartridge games to late Sega Genesis cartridge games, and the difference and the fact there are no chips in there, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was unnecessary. You know, I don't want to get too deep into the Sega CD because
we will get there.
Yeah, we'll drop. But I mean, the 92 was the end of 92, and 93 was definitely the drop off point. I mean, to the extent that, you know, Sega tried to prop up the Sega CD with Sonic CD, just like they did, you know, with the Genesis. Yeah. And I think Sonic CD is a interesting, if not overrated, entry into the series.
Yeah,
but you know, is it a system seller? No. As a matter of fact, it'd be the equivalent of being like, okay, Sonic 1 brought you in, and we really want you to all you know, millions of Genesis owners, buy this Sega CD, and then they change everything you love about Sonic. You know, it's like a.
You mean like Sonic Adventure?
Kind of. No, not quite a bait and switch. Sonic Adventure it showed its hand right from the title.
Sonic Adventure is secretly the worst Sonic game of all time, by the way. Just saying.
I don't know, man. I haven't played Sonic Boom. That's kind of a...
No, Sonic Boom... Well, actually, Sonic Boom how do you say this? Sonic Boom structurally falls apart just as much as Sonic Adventure did, so it's pretty equal.
And to say, though, I do agree that Sonic Adventure is like hanging on by a thread every time you play it.
It's not a good game.
I enjoyed it.
It took me a few years to realise it. I'm such a huge Dreamcast fan, and Sonic Adventure was my Mario 64. You know, it was my.
It was a lot of people's. People really wanted to like it.
It took me years to say yes. It's crap. I can say it out loud. It's not very good.
I'll fight for Sonic Adventure 2, though. I'll fight for that one.
Really?
I think. Well, I'll say this: I've never played the Dreamcast version. I do enjoy the GameCube.
It's exactly the same.
Okay, then I'll fight for it.
Really? Wow. Shadow.
Well, I didn't say I'd fight for the story.
Shadow.
You know what I liked about it is that I hadn't played a Sonic when that came out.
Sonic Adventure 2 is where the canon of Sonic just went, you know what? Screw it. What do you want? Girls in space stations? Go for it. It's crazy ultimate life forms that just happens to be a hedgehog? Go for it. It's just like, that's where the canon fell to pieces.
As someone who devoured gaming magazines at the time and saw how many people just said Sonic Adventure 2 is terrible. You know what, Sonic Adventure 2, you know why that the story is that bad, in my opinion, is because they're trying to emulate the comic. And the comic started off great and ventured into insanity. Okay. And I think they were trying to bring the worlds closer together. I mean, they're still trying to do it with the whole Sonic Boom cartoon tie-in and all that.
The cartoon, Sonic Boom the cartoon, is pretty good.
Yeah.
It's alright. As a reboot, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fine. It looks nice. they've taken it a different direction. They've given them a whole new setting. They've got rid of all the cities and all stuff, and they've gone for like a tribal thing. They've got a new character, which isn't terrible, and all this kind of thing. The game is, God, it's like, why didn't Sega make it themselves?
Well, that's my question with any Japanese game company that, like Konami especially, though.
Oh, they've just given up, man.
Yeah, I mean now it makes sense, but when they were shilling out Silent Hill to all these British companies and then Double Helix, which had never made a game before, and I was just like, what are they doing? This is just not. And then now it makes sense because they didn't care, and they were like, well, go make something.
Says as Nintendo fanboys who've just shifted off Twilight Princess to some Australian studio.
Oh, I know. When I heard that, I'm like, okay, well, but see, I tend to trust Nintendo a bit more than Sega or Konami, so
they'll test it before it actually goes on sale.
It'd be funny if they had to push back the HD remake. Like,
don't put it past them.
Yeah, see,
actually, I wonder what odds I'd get in the bookies for Wii U Zelda coming out before HD Twilight Princess.
That's probably some pretty.
I wouldn't say it was impossible. I would not.
No, not impossible.
No.
Well, we've managed to totally veer into...
We have, yes. I can't remember what the hell I was talking about. Anyway, Sega CD, that came out. And there was also another little known thing called the 32X, which was god-awful.
Yeah. My cousin actually got one of those as well when they went on sale for $20, and Toys R Us was...
They famously went from 175.
Yeah, it was. They were up there.
They literally 6 months later were on sale for $20 each, and they still couldn't sell them.
95 and 96 were like the year of get rid of the system. Like Sega had the 32X, and then
it was the year of great hindsight. Is what it was. It's like,
oh my gosh. Yeah.
If I just had like $1,000 around then, that could have turned into like 50, no problem.
Anyway. Yeah, 32X not so good. Could have been good, but wasn't.
No.
And real quick, I did want to touch on some of the peripherals that the.
Yes.
I mean, you could argue that the Sega CD and 32X are in fact peripherals.
I would say they were like cancers.
The cancer tumors, yes.
Tumors, yes. That's more PC words.
But the power base converter. Did you guys get this?
Yes.
In the UK?
Yes. I have one. It's my most favourite thing in the whole world because you can play stuff in RGB that wasn't really in RGB in the first place.
Yep. So
brilliant.
Basically, it played Master System games.
Yeah.
On only the Mark 1, though, not the Mark 2.
No, there was another one released for the Mark 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, which wasn't as good. But there is one game. Oh, Christ. And it's going to escape me. There is one game that does not work on it. And it's like a wire-based like flying game.
I know what you're talking about.
We've reviewed it and we've talked about it. And you mentioned it then. And you went, this is the only game that doesn't work on the power-based converter. It was like a really crap VR flying game. Like a flight simulator on the Mass System. Leave comments. We need to know what that game was. We've talked about it. I've played it. It was awful. It'll be some like plane's name with turbo smashed on the end, like F-16 turbo or something like that. But
I can't remember.
But there is one game that does not work with it. Apart from that, they all work, which is great.
And also, there's the Sega channel. Sega channel.
We didn't get that here. I'm sure we didn't.
Yeah. I like it. As a kid, I thought, wow, that's really interesting. As an adult, I'm like, wow, that's about the most forward-thinking thing.
What's that, about 20 years ahead of PlayStation now, isn't it?
Yeah, and about infinitely cheaper.
Yep. Yeah. What was it, $12 a month?
It was 15.
Okay.
Plus the 25 activation fee, but you could play from a list of 35 to 50 games.
Wow.
A month, and they would rotate them too. So,
wow.
If you consider that, game rentals are about $4 to $5 back in those days.
So actually, the Sega channel kind of kicked ass, didn't it?
Yeah, the only problem is that you had to have Time Warner cable, which...
Did you?
No, I did not. I don't know. I had some...
No
my parents took
Sega
weird... Yeah, no Sega channel. And that was fine, because I was more into the Super Nintendo, but... I had a friend that had Time Warner and the Sega channel, and let me just say, that was glorious.
Okay, can I ask a question? I've always been intrigued, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Download speed. So you go into the menu, I want to play Mega Man The Wily Wars. Yeah. How fast can you play it?
From what I recall,
yeah,
and considering we were impatient kids, it really didn't take that long. Maybe 30 seconds.
Wow.
Now, if somebody had the Sega channel for a long period of time, wants to come along and correct me, that's fine. But
so did you have like a special cartridge that went in the top?
Yep, special cartridge.
And it just downloaded them onto that, and that was it?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Could you then unplug it and play them?
No, right, I don't believe so.
It always wanted to connect to the Sega channel to activate. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty cool. I've never talked to somebody who actually played on the Sega channel. How exciting is this, everybody?
Well, I forget the figure, and for whatever reason I didn't put it in my article, but there was a figure somewhere recently about, or not recently, but somewhere that I read, at its peak it had 3 million, just a handful,
wow.
Like subscribers. And that might be a little much. It may have been only like 1 to 2. It was definitely over.
If it had over 1 million, I am very impressed.
Yeah, I believe so. We need to look it up, actually.
Yeah, we should do that. Next time.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And it lasted until, gosh, like 98, I think they shut it down.
Wow.
So, wow. I mean, it lasted well into the Saturn, and, yeah, and actually, I remember playing it. I didn't play it when it was new. I played it in like 97 or 98.
Oh, right.
Back when it was like, yeah, it wasn't. And my friend still had it. I'm like, wait, because I remember. Yeah, I remembered reading about it as a kid, and I was like, whoa, you have the Sega channel. He instantly became like the coolest kid to me. Yeah. So.
You sound like falling down a flight of stairs there, Dylan. What's going on?
I am. I have to look up the Sega channel. I have to. Like, it's going to drive me bonkers. Okay. I don't want to get corrected by any nerds in the. I mean, people who really care.
With an interest in video games.
Yeah.
Yes. By the way, on the Sega Mega Drive, talk through, or Sega Mega Drive post, I should say, on the Sega's website, there is the greatest animated GIF in the world of ToeJam and Earl dancing. It's just brilliant. Everybody go there, copy that, put it everywhere you can, because that's fantastic.
Okay, so yeah, in North America it was broadcast for a full 4 years.
Wow.
So that would put it around 98.
So it didn't come out until 94?
Right.
Oh wow, I thought it was earlier than that.
Nope.
Oh, okay. But see, that makes even less sense, because they were killing the Genesis off by then. If you tell me the Sega channel, right, hang on a minute. If you tell me the Sega channel came out, when did it come out?
94.
Yeah, when in 94?
June.
Wow. When did the Saturn come out in Japan?
Oh, well, in 94 sometime. I know that.
Jesus. Sega, you were nuts.
And I was wrong. It actually only had 250,000 subscribers.
Oh, okay.
That's still, I mean...
That's not bad.
That's not bad.
$15 a month.
Yeah.
Mm. So they launched this channel, which is awesome. Like 2 months before they're releasing their next console. That's... Talk about the East not talking to the West. That's just Sega. That's just crazy. Anyway, that is the Sega Does Podcast, episode 28. It's all about the Sega Mega Drive, or the Sega Genesis. It's a very fascinating console. If you want to know more about it, it's everywhere. But obviously, you want to look at it as Sega does with Dylan's nice little slant on it that he gives it.
Yeah, it's everywhere, but really it's only one place.
One place. I mean, where else can you get a picture of Michael Jackson and Sonic the Hedgehog holding a bunch of roses? I mean,
certainly not Google Images.
No,
I mean,
no.
That's not where I got it from.
Along with the animated GIF of Toe Manole, which is just the best in the world. So yeah, Sega Genesis, pretty good. Pretty good. I'd give it probably 3 3/4 stars out of 5.
I'd give it a solid A minus. Solid A minus.
Solid.
Like teetering on the edge of an
Come
A.
Come on, though. It's got to lose. You can't. It's hard to play the games on that controller.
I know. That's why it has an A minus. But the games are there.
No, it's pretty damn solid, if we're honest.
I mean, it's the best. Like,
is it the best Sega console?
All respect to Dreamcast. It's the best Sega console. It's the best one.
You know what? I've kind of fallen out of love with the Dreamcast at the minute. A little bit.
You guys are having a fight.
I'm kind of having a bit of
couch.
a fight. It's kind of like showing, actually, give it 10 years and it's yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's the fact that right, I left this made me laugh, right? During the summer on our brief break period, okay, I was out, like, I have my games room and I have my lawn is outside, obviously, like next to the games room. Okay, so room, lawn. Okay, I left a copy of Crazy Taxi in my Dreamcast just running because I thought my son was playing it. It wasn't. Okay, I was mowing the lawn, blah 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 blah, and I stopped mowing the lawn and I hear this sound, and it sounds like a rat's killing another rat, like they're having that fight. Okay, like I was like, what the fuck? It's like, what the hell is that? So I burst into the games room. It's the Dreamcast loading. That thing is so loud. How they ever... I'll just spend a few more cents on a decent CD drive. Come on. Well, GD-ROM or whatever the hell we're going to call it. You can hear that thing from halfway down the street. It's crazy.
When my friend got me a Dreamcast when they were dirt cheap, when they were being discontinued again in like 2002, he bought me one, and
when you turned it on, you thought it was broken, didn't you?
I was like, what is happening?
Yep,
like,
I did too.
I remember thinking, like, my poor friend, because he had moved from Florida to Arizona, and he bought it in Florida. I'm like, well, he bought a lemon, like, this is just this isn't gonna work.
It's not, no, that's what it sounds like.
And then I'm playing Shenmue. I'm like, well, everything seems to be going okay. And then as it would load, I'm like, oh, it's just the system being loud as hell. Yep. that's the issue. Yep. So, loudest Dreamcast, and I think the original Xbox are like my two. Oh no, not the original Xbox. The original 360.
The original 360 is pretty loud.
Holy moly!
Jeez.
Yeah. Well, that's just,
We're talking about great sounds. Let's finish this off with a bit of 16-bit Michael Jackson. What do you think?
Sounds good.
Sounds good to me. Anyway,
to celebrate. It's a celebration.
The celebration of everything that was great in the 90s. Even Michael Jackson was good. That's how good the 90s were. Even Michael Jackson was awesome.
Yes.
So, episode 28. We are back. Sega, Dylan.
Sega.
I better not screw this up.